2 years ago, I was making $63,000 a year, yet my savings account held exactly $812. I was systematically funding my own financial destruction with a smile on my face, completely blind to the silent trap I had walked into. 2 years ago, I realized I was actively funding my own financial destruction. And the worst part was, I was doing it with a smile on my face. It was a cold, silent Tuesday night when the fragile illusion of my success completely shattered right onto my kitchen table. I was sitting there staring at a pile of shopping bags filled with things that felt absolutely urgent an hour prior, but now looked completely empty. 3 scented candles I didn't need, a decorative throw pillow to replace one that was perfectly fine, and a sleek kitchen gadget that would undoubtedly sit in its box, collecting dust right next to the last one I bought and never opened. Then, I opened my banking app, and my breath caught in my throat. My credit card statement for that single month showed $4,100 in charges. I swiped over to my savings account, praying the number had somehow grown. The balance was exactly $812. At that exact moment, a wave of cold, suffocating reality hit me. I was making $63,000 a year. I had been earning over $50,000 for 6 years straight. By every modern societal standard, I was winning. I had the professional job, the corporate title, and the visible markers of a successful American life. Yet, after more than half a decade of grinding, I had essentially nothing to show for it. I was running on a brutal, invisible consumer treadmill, burning my precious time and energy just to fund a lifestyle that left me feeling deeply anxious every single time I checked my mail. If you have ever felt that exact same hollow knot in your stomach, welcome to MyWiseWallet, a space where we pull back the curtain and look at the psychological truth behind our money. If you are ready to break free from this hidden trap with me, take a second to hit that subscribe button right now. Your support is the only reason we can keep diving into these raw, unfiltered perspectives together. That shameful night at my kitchen table forced me to analyze the invisible machinery operating beneath our daily habits. I realized my problem wasn't the size of my paycheck, it was the cultural philosophy running my mind. See, in the West, our entire economy is engineered to perform wealth. We celebrate the transaction. New car, new suburban house, new seasonal wardrobe, congratulations. Wealth here is dynamic only if it is visible, posted, and validated by the applause of people we barely know. But that very week, while looking for answers, I stumbled onto an article about a century-old Japanese budgeting ledger called Kakeibo, documented by an author named Fumiko Chiba. What gripped me wasn't the mathematical mechanics of the ledger itself. It was a staggering detail buried deep in the text. Many Japanese households didn't learn these financial habits from an expensive online seminar or a modern app. They had been practicing them for generations, quietly passing them down from grandmothers to mothers, and mothers to daughters. These families were building massive, resilient wealth completely out of sight across decades, using principles so simple they felt almost insulting compared to the incredibly complex, over-engineered advice I had been consuming on YouTube and Instagram for years. The realization was a shock to my system. Japan's cultural relationship with money is the exact, literal mirror opposite of America's. In Japan, wealth is hidden. It is actually considered tasteless and slightly embarrassing to put your financial capacity on display. They live by an ancient ethos called Sutsunashi, which translates roughly to being modestly reserved and elegantly simple. It commands immense social respect. The more quietly and intentionally you live, the more admired you are by the community. In our culture, if you live too quietly, people automatically assume you are struggling. We mistake loud consumption for financial strength and quiet preservation for failure. I decided right then to run an experiment. I stopped trying to optimize my spreadsheets, and instead quietly installed this ancient Japanese operating system into my modern life. I didn't ask for a raise. I didn't launch an exhausting side hustle, and I didn't stop enjoying my life. I just completely shifted the philosophy underneath my transactions. In 12 short months, my savings account went from that fragile $812 to over $19,000. Same job, same salary, same apartment, but a completely different human being. There are 10 specific, quiet habits that built this lasting wealth, and they go much deeper than basic budgets. Every single one of them can be used in your life right now in 2026, and they will completely change how you view your resources. Let's look at the first shift. To truly understand how this shift happens, we have to look at the practical tools that step in to disrupt our default behavior, beginning with a system that forces our hidden financial reality directly into the light. The absolute bedrock of this entire transformation is a tool called Kakeibo, a handwritten household ledger. This framework is over 120 years old, created in 1904 by Hani Motoko, Japan's first female journalist. She designed it during an era when women possessed almost zero financial autonomy, offering it as a quiet weapon for housewives to seize control of their family's destiny using nothing but a blank notebook and a pen. The core design of Kakeibo is intentionally ancient, almost brutally unautomated. At the beginning of every month, you sit down and physically write out 4 metrics by hand: how much money is coming in, how much is required for fixed expenses, how much you want to save, and exactly how much you have left over to spend. Then, every single night, you record what you spent that day, sorting each transaction into just 4 clean categories: needs, wants, culture, and unexpected expenses. At the end of the month, you close the loop by answering 3 fundamental questions. How much did I save? What went well? What can I improve next month? When I first read about this, I was skeptical. It sounded too simple to actually work in a modern economy. But as I practiced it, the psychological genius of the system became clear. The human brain is highly sensitive to friction, and our current financial infrastructure is completely obsessed with removing it. We have Apple Pay, face scanners, auto removals, and one-click buying. When you tap a card or glance at a screen to pay, your brain barely registers the sacrifice. Money has become an invisible, painless abstraction. Kakeibo deliberately reintroduces that pain. It forces cognitive friction back into the equation. When you sit down in the quiet of the evening and manually write out DoorDash, $42, your physical movement forces your brain to process the trade-off. Your hand is telling your brain something a slick budgeting app never could. You chose to spend $42 real on convenience, and that purchase belonged squarely in the want column. Recent data from YouGov indicates that 47% of Americans entered 2026 without any budget framework whatsoever. And those who do budget mostly rely on automated apps that aggregate the data for them. The app does the work, and the user's brain stays completely asleep. Kakeibo forces you to wake up, and once you are awake, your spending behavior alters before the transaction even happens. This heightened awareness leads directly into the second habit, Mottainai, a deep, visceral sense of regret regarding waste. In the West, we don't have a singular word that captures this emotional weight. Mottainai is the discomfort that arises when an object or a resource is discarded without fully extracting its utility. In Japanese culture, wasting something isn't just an inefficient financial choice. It is a failure of respect toward the world. Contrast this with our structural habits. The USDA notes that the average American household wastes approximately 30% of the food they buy, throwing roughly $2,100 a year directly into the garbage. According to the EPA, we discard about 82 pounds of clothing per person annually. When I began tracking my own waste through the lens of Mottainai, I took photos of everything I threw out of my fridge for a week. The amount of wilted greens, expired dairy, and forgotten leftovers was deeply embarrassing. I was tossing $40 a week straight into the trash. By applying Mottainai, I stopped buying groceries based on what sounded exciting in the moment and began planning strictly around what was already expiring in my pantry. Within 90 days, my grocery bill dropped by 30%, not because I was eating less, but because I stopped throwing my hard-earned money into a landfill. This brings us to the third pillar of this consciousness shift, Hara, a principle famously practiced in Okinawa, instructing people to eat until they are only 80% full. When you translate this beyond food into a general philosophy of money, it means you purposefully refuse to fill your lifestyle to 100% capacity. You intentionally leave a 20% margin. That unspent room isn't deprivation. It is the exact territory where financial resilience lives. Practically, it means treating 80% of your take-home pay as your absolute ceiling. If you earn $4,200 a month after taxes, you adjust your reality to live on $3,360, letting the remaining $840 vanish into savings automatically the day it arrives. The Bureau of Economic Analysis reported that the U.S. personal savings rate sat at a meager 4% as of early 2026. The gap between that 4% and the 20% Hara benchmark is the difference between retiring anxious and retiring completely free. On a standard $60,000 salary, that 16-point gap is the difference between saving $2,400 a year and saving $12,000. Over 30 years at an 8% return, that single adjustment compounds into a difference of over $1 million. It is an act of profound self-respect, telling your future self that you cared enough to leave something behind. Once you establish this baseline of conscious awareness, the true challenge shifts from simply tracking your numbers to permanently altering the psychological geometry of your daily choices. This brings us directly to the fourth habit, Kaizen, the philosophy of continuous, incremental improvement. While many Western professionals recognize Kaizen as a corporate manufacturing framework optimized by global giants like Toyota in Japanese daily life, it serves as a deeply personal approach to habit formation. The central premise is beautiful, massive, sweeping transformations are inherently unstable, but true, lasting change is built by compounding 1% adjustments over an extended timeline. When applied to money, Kaizen stands in direct opposition to the traditional Western financial overhaul. We have all seen people decide in a burst of temporary inspiration to radically slash their spending, cancel every streaming service, stop eating out entirely, and live like a monk. By March, the restriction becomes utterly unbearable, their willpower collapses under the pressure, and they revert right back to their old consumption patterns. There is a fascinating neurological reason for this failure. Your brain's amygdala, the ancient fear center, is highly sensitive to sudden, drastic shifts in your routine, flagging massive lifestyle changes as an immediate threat and triggering intense psychological resistance. Kaizen safely flies completely under the amygdala's radar. Instead of attempting to cut your dining budget by half overnight, Kaizen suggests reducing it by a mere 10% this month. Next month, you increase your retirement contribution by just 1%. The following month, you identify and cancel one single unused subscription. A few weeks later, you pick up the phone to negotiate a lower rate on your internet bill. Isolated, each of these actions feels so small that it requires almost zero active willpower. Yet across a year, these tiny, unnoticeable 1% shifts accumulate into a massive overhaul of your cash flow without ever triggering a deprivation response. To keep these small shifts on track, however, you need a North Star, which leads us to our fifth habit. Ikigai, your reason for being. In the West, this has been commercialized as a neat career alignment matrix. But within its native cultural context, it simply means having a clear, deeply held purpose that gives structure and intrinsic value to your daily life. When you bring Ikigai into your relationship with money, it solves the missing variable that most spreadsheets ignore, answering the question, what is all this capital actually for? I have a friend named Terrence who struggled with chronic impulse spending for years until he truly defined his Ikigai. He wanted to be fully present, stress-free, and available for his daughter's childhood without the dark cloud of financial insecurity hanging over his head. Once that realization solidified, his behavior shifted naturally because when he browsed retail sites late at night, those potential purchases didn't just look expensive. They looked completely irrelevant to his life's purpose. This deep clarity allows you to fully embrace our sixth habit, Wabi-Sabi, the cultural appreciation of imperfection, impermanence, and the incomplete. Wabi-Sabi is the absolute antidote to the relentless consumer engine that drives Western spending, which is structurally engineered to trigger a deep, ongoing dissatisfaction with things that still function perfectly. It retrains your brain to find beauty and satisfaction in utility and history. A jacket showing subtle wear or a vehicle that is reliably older, rather than pristine novelty. The financial math behind this mindset shift is staggering. Data shows that the average American household spends roughly $9,500 annually on apparel, home decor, and consumer electronics. If adopting a Wabi-Sabi perspective reduces that aesthetic churn by just 25%, you instantly redirect $2,375 a year back into your control. Compounded over 25 years, that single philosophical choice builds roughly $183,000, all extracted from a baseline decision to find contentment in what you already own. Stepping away from the emotional and aesthetic shifts in our mindset allows us to focus entirely on the cold, hard infrastructure of our monthly cash flow, where these philosophies finally transform into concrete financial security. This bringing us directly to the seventh habit on our list, Soji, the traditional annual deep clean. In Japan, Soji is a deeply intentional ritual performed at the conclusion of the calendar year, where families thoroughly cleanse their physical spaces, clearing out accumulated clutter to enter the new year with absolute mental clarity. When you translate this into a financial practice, it becomes your mandatory annual financial audit. Once a year, preferably during the calm of January, you sit down and systematically audit every single corridor of your financial life, printing out statements to look at the dead weight you've accumulated. Most people set up their digital financial lives once and completely ignore them, allowing subscriptions to quietly auto-renew and premiums to creep upward. During my very first financial Soji, I discovered I was losing $318 a month to automated software subscriptions, old premium memberships, and hidden service fees I no longer utilized. which amounted to $3,816 a year silently evaporating from my checking account while I wasn't looking. Plugging those leaks sets the stage for our eighth habit, Chokin, the deeply ingrained practice of saving first. Under the standard model most of us were raised on, the flow of capital is reactionary. You earn your paycheck, you spend money on your needs and wants throughout the month, and then you try to save whatever happens to be left over at the end. The Chokin model completely flips this order of operations. You earn your paycheck, you immediately extract a designated percentage for savings and investments, and then you live on whatever remains. The distinction might sound purely semantic, but behaviorally, it changes everything because it breaks Parkinson's law. The psychological reality that expenditures automatically rise to meet the exact level of available income. In a modern context, the most effective way to practice Chokin is through automation, arranging for your investment allocations to execute the exact morning after your paycheck deposits. Consider Marcus, who earns $4,800 a month after taxes under the typical reactionary model, spending throughout the month and letting his cash expand to fill the room, leaving his actual savings rate hovering around a meager 3%. Now, imagine Marcus adopts Chokin, setting an automatic transfer to move 20%, $960, out of his primary checking account the morning after payday, forcing his spending reality to instantly contract to $3,840. After one single year, Marcus has accumulated $11,520 in investments, compared to just $1,728 under his old paradigm. Projected out over 20 years at an 8% average market return, Marcus's Chokin habit builds approximately $570,000, while his old habit leaves him with just over $100,000 on the exact same salary. This structural sequence explains why revolving consumer debt crossed a staggering $1.28 trillion in the United States, while remaining culturally unusual in Japan, where credit cards are set to auto-pay the full balance every single month by default. To comfortably sustain a high savings rate like Chokin without feeling restricted, you need our ninth habit, Shinrin Yoku, or forest bathing. In its primary form, it is the practice of spending quiet, undigitized time immersed in nature to restore mental clarity. But economically, it represents a broader lifestyle choice, building your leisure around activities that carry a $0 transaction cost. In modern Western society, entertainment has become completely commodified, where the default assumption for a weekend involves a credit card swipe. Premium drinks, restaurant reservations, or shopping excursions framed as casual recreation, driving the average household to spend roughly $3,000 a year purely on externalized entertainment. Shinrin Yoku reminds us that the highest value moments of human experience happen without a transaction. Long walks through local trail systems, hosting a potluck dinner at home where everyone cooks together, or spending an afternoon reading at the public library generate deep fulfillment without a financial cost. When I consciously started shifting my weekend plans away from commercial venues and toward free, nature-centric alternatives, my discretionary entertainment spending dropped by over 60% within 90 days, proving that the richest moments of life require presence, not consumption. All of these strategic structural changes to your cash flow, however, require a final intellectual anchor to prevent them from drifting back into old, reactionary patterns over time. This brings us directly to our 10th and final habit, Hansei, the deeply ingrained Japanese practice of honest, rigorous self-reflection. Hansei is not a tool for harsh self-criticism, nor is it rooted in a sense of guilt or personal failure. Instead, it is a structured, quiet pause to look directly into the financial mirror without judgment, acknowledging exactly what worked, where you drifted, and how you will adjust. In practice, Hansei is the 10-minute monthly review that officially closes your Kakeibo loop. You sit down with your notebook, look at your handwritten numbers, and answer 3 precise questions. Did I meet my savings goal? Which specific purchases brought me genuine value? What will I do differently next month? Without Hansei, your financial practices remain entirely static, destined to be abandoned the moment life gets busy or stressful. This single habit is the crucial feedback loop that keeps the other 9 alive, sharpening your awareness of waste and keeping your long-term goals aligned. When you look at this entire framework, you realize that every single habit we explored operates on the exact same mechanical engine that drives the financial markets, the undeniable power of compounding. A simple notebook, a 10-minute monthly reflection, or a deliberate choice to live on 80% of your income does not look like a grand wealth-building strategy on any given afternoon. But when these micro-behaviors are stacked on top of one another, practiced day after day, month after month, they yield an outcome that no raw income bracket can ever guarantee on its own. They build a relationship with money that is profoundly stable, intentional, and entirely free from chronic anxiety. The most financially secure people I have ever met don't possess a secret investment trick or a massive inheritance. What they possess is a deep, fundamental level of financial literacy. They understand that a dollar saved and protected is mathematically superior to an extra dollar earned, because the saved dollar arrives completely free from income tax, requires no additional physical labor, and causes zero professional burnout. Financial literacy is the vital, nutrient-rich soil that these 10 traditional habits require to grow. Without that understanding, Kakeibo is just a notebook, Mottainai is just a word, and Chokin is just a temporary concept you heard about in a video and forgot by next week. But with it, these habits transform into a resilient, quiet system that builds your security the same way a traditional garden grows. Slowly, intentionally, with every single element placed for a definitive reason. The person I was 2 years ago, sitting at that kitchen table surrounded by bags of things I didn't actually need a larger paycheck. I needed a completely different philosophy. I needed to learn that true wealth isn't built by continuously earning more. It is built by understanding more and desiring less. You don't need a massive salary increase to change your financial trajectory. You might already make more than enough money to build a resilient life. You simply need a basic notebook, a pen, and the willingness to pay attention to where your life is actually going. Looking back at this entire journey, the transformation of my relationship with money didn't happen because I mastered a complex investment algorithm or started tracking stock charts for hours every night. It happened because I stepped off the exhausting treadmill of Western consumerism and replaced it with a quiet, intentional operating system. When you strip away all the financial noise, the math of wealth accumulation is remarkably simple. It is the sequence of your choices, not the size of your paycheck, that dictates your freedom. By reintroducing conscious friction through a handwritten notebook, prioritizing resource respect, and automating a 20% margin before spending even begins, you create a fortress of financial resilience. This isn't about living a life of painful deprivation or counting pennies until you lose your joy. It is about cultivating a deep sense of self-respect that refuses to sacrifice your future security for today's temporary comfort. The profound lesson here is that a dollar saved is mathematically and psychologically superior to an extra dollar earned. The extra dollar requires your physical labor, your energy, and your time, and it arrives heavily taxed. The saved dollar is already yours, completely free from income tax, free from professional burnout, and ready to compound quietly in the background. To apply this to your life starting today, do not try to overhaul everything at once and trigger your brain's natural resistance. Pick up a simple notebook tonight, write down your baseline numbers by hand, and commit to finding just one single 1% improvement this week. Look at your cash flow not as a restriction, but as a garden that you are slowly, intentionally cultivating for your own peace of mind. To help us get this conversation started, I want to hear your perspective. Which of these 10 habits felt the most immediate or challenging to you? And are you someone who prefers using a physical notebook or an automated app to track your life? Please share your thoughts in the comment section below so we can learn from each other's experiences. And if this deeper perspective brought value to your day, please hit that subscribe button to join our community and support the channel. Your subscription is what gives us the momentum to keep digging into these life-changing philosophies together.